Hello there, and welcome to the Meaningful Stitch. I'm Amy Palco, and I'm coming to you from Edinburgh, Scotland. And this is the third mini episode following my progress of the GoGo Dynamo shawl, which is Stephen West's 2024 MKAL. And if you've been following along, then you'll know that in the first two episodes, I've drawn a card for each one of the clues. And I've drawn them from this deck here, which is the Witch Sister Tarot by Julia Jeffrey. It's a deck that has a very particular emphasis on Celtic lore and Scottish witchcraft history. I'm really enjoying it, and I draw from it often. And I have drawn a third card for our third clue. So let me share with you what card I drew. Oh, that rhymed. I drew this card here, which is Neven. Now, this is the card that represents in the traditional tarot the High Priestess. So I'm just going to read you a little bit from the guide that Julia Jeffrey has shared with us. Neven. The second card in the Major Arcana is traditionally titled the High Priestess. Neven is the great witch queen of Scottish folklore. In his highly influential book, Letters on Demonology and Witchcraft, Sir Walter Scott connects Neven with the Greek witch goddess Hecate and also with the Wild Hunt and the Fairy Raid. As well as the name of this mythological figure, Neven is also the title of a role within historical Scottish witch covens, equivalent to High Priestess, as also mentioned by Scott and Isabel Gowdy. The figure of Neven remains shrouded in mystery. Shadow and moonlight are her domain. Surviving writings about her are extremely scant and mainly from centuries later than the time of her strongest folkloric currency. But echoes of her are still felt in Scottish culture today, perhaps most notably in her association with Halloween traditions. And we're told that in a reading, Neven shows us that we have the courage we need to look within our hearts and that we will find answers there. So, one of the things about the High Priestess card in the traditional tarot is that she is all about the mystery. And this, of course, is a mystery knit-along. And I know that some people feel quite uncomfortable with the idea of a mystery knit-along. They want to know what the finished piece is first before they commit. They want to know a bit more before they're able to choose their colours, and that's all fair enough. You know, I think it's quite difficult to make choices when we are faced with the unknown, and that is as true for our knitting as it is true for our lives. But I think for me, and I'm also uncomfortable with various different elements of the unknown and the mystery, but I do find that bringing in an element of mystery into my knitting, it's actually a very rejuvenating and exciting process. I find it very inspiring because it means that I'm not necessarily in complete control of this knitting journey. I get to give myself over to another's creativity and explore and interact with that as I go along. I get to make choices. I get to engage with that mystery and dance with it. And I think that's actually a really good practice, both in terms of our own creativity, but also I think in terms of just basic life skills, being able to develop a level of inspiration, imagination, resilience, and a responsiveness to life as it meets us in the moment. So, what did clue 3 bring for us? Well, as always, I'm going to share spoilers. So, this is the finished clue 3. And I found it a shorter knit because we were basically following this, creating this, oh dear, I've got it round the wrong way. There we go. Yeah, that's the right way. We were basically creating this long border. Now, at the moment, what we seem to have is this, that's the depth of it so far. It's quite a long, skinny shawl, perhaps more of a scarf than a shawl at the moment. And we do seem to have bound off. Well, we have bound off. We have no live stitches at all anymore. Just as a wee reminder, my colours are Lallybroch and Poison Apple in Sheepish Sock by Ginger Twist Studio, which is my local yarn shop. and I added in a little mohair there, which you can see here, which is a very low contrast to my Lallybroch yarn, and I've used that for my brioche, for just to bring in an extra element. I just held one strand of mohair single, not double like Stephen did in his tutorial. But this is what we have just now. We have our modular section here, we have our bubbles in our brioche section here, and now we have this short row border section. And it's kind of creating this beautiful scalloped edge, which is so interesting. I did actually really enjoy this clue. Now, that's the cast off, other end. So, but what I would say is I started by breaking my yarn, which is also as Stephen suggested in his tutorial. So I was breaking my contrast yarn, weaving it in as I went. So, you know, I can now just cut that because as you can see, it's already woven in. I used the weaving in technique that I've explained here before, which is basically two hand stranded knitting colour work. So holding your yarn as though you're doing two-handed colour work and catching your float just to weave your end in, and it just kind of creates a really neat and easy way of weaving those ends in. However, after I got to this point, I was like, this is actually looking a little bit messy, and I'm not sure if I like that. So what I then started to do is I started to catch my yarn inside the I-cords, and I just kept the one strand going the whole way through. Now, the other thing I would say too is that because this is an I-cord and and it's a border, you're obviously going to want to create some stretch. So you have to be quite careful if you're going to catch that colour, that contrast colour through this I-cord, that before you start on your next contrast colour section, that you give it a bit of a stretch, because you don't want to end up with things being puckered, and you don't want to end up with your yarn, your contrast, which is running through this I-cord here, from here to here. You don't want that to be too tight. So I just gave it a little bit of a stretch before I then started on the next colour work section. And I did that the whole way along. And I think that has resulted in a kind of a cleaner look on both the wrong side, that's the right side, and the wrong side. So that was one adjustment I made. Another adjustment that I made was, I've been knitting this on my ChiaoGoo fixed circular needles, which are my favourite needles for lace knitting, because the red cable doesn't hold a memory, so it just stays completely straight, and that means that your knitting doesn't then try and, you know, spiral in on itself, which can be a bit annoying. Sometimes it feels with cable needles that you are kind of battling your knitting, but you don't ever find that. Well, I never find that with my ChiaoGoos. However, what I wanted to do with short rows, and just because I find it a lot easier to do that, is I used a DPN, a double pointed needle, as my second needle, and that just made things a lot easier, because then I'm not having to again kind of manage my cable, manage this very, very long shawl here. This is all just being held on the one long needle, and then I'm using a DPN in my other hand, and that just made it a lot easier for working through. I didn't feel as though I was wrestling with this very long, well, at the moment I would say it's a wrap. But the other thing I was thinking, which is in connection with the card that I drew, is that essentially, like I said, we've bound off. We have no more live stitches. This is the border by all intents and purposes. Maybe we are going to pick up along this I-cord edge and knit onto it. But I kind of doubt that, because it's already kind of at a very long point, a very wide point from this end to this end. So I don't think we're going to be adding any more width onto this shawl. I think it's probably at its maximum width, but we have cast off. So, mystery. What lives on the other side of that which is complete? that which we believe is finished off. When we come to the end of something, particularly as we're moving through the life, death, life mysteries, you know, these cycles that move through our lives when we are, you know, birthing something, creating something, casting something on, and then we're following it the whole way through the process, bringing it to culmination, ripening, fruition, and then release, completion, cast off. There's a period of the mystery. Yeah? There's a period in between the casting off and the casting on. There's a life that there's something that exists in that, and it's not necessarily something which is tangible or knowable, but it's the mystery. So I feel we are absolutely in this moment of Nick Neven, of the High Priestess, of the mystery, because there's something which is going to be coming after this clue, because we have the fourth clue coming out on Thursday. So what exists in this mysterious place? We're gonna find out. I suspect, and I could be wrong, I have no insider knowledge here, but I suspect we might be picking up something along this edge here and then doing decreases to kind of bring it in a little bit and create a bit more depth. Because like I said, this is really a very narrow shawl. So let's see where it goes next. I am super fascinated, and I know that Stephen has said that there is going to be an opportunity for another mohair dare, so we get to play a little bit more with our mohair. And I also know that he said that there's going to be an option to cast off early if you want to have a smaller shawl, and you can then keep on going until you have no yarn left. I will show you actually how much yarn I've got left, because I have finished the first skein of my main colour, and this is what I've got left of this one, and I have this much left, this little nugget here, from my first skein of my contrast, and that's obviously because I did do the mohair dare on the brioche. If I had used this yarn with the brioche, then I would also already be on my second skein. So I still have quite a lot of yarn left to use. Oh, plus a mohair dare. So I'm not going to run out of yarn. I'm not worried about that in the slightest. That's quite a lot of yarn to have going into the fourth clue, but he did say that we were going to be able to knit it for to create a larger piece, as large as we want it, I think he said. Wonder what that means. Well, we're going to find out. So like I said, last clue comes out on Thursday, so I will get to knitting that as soon as it comes out, and I will share the fourth episode of this GoGo Dynamo shawl progress series next week. And then there'll be one more, I think, once I get it washed and blocked and worn, and maybe have a look and see how I could fit it into my wardrobe, because I think sometimes being able to see how we wear a shawl, how we can fit it along with some other clothes and things could be really helpful too. So, and I will share, I'll share another couple of cards from the Witch Sister Tarot. Okay, my darlings, you take good care, and I will speak to you next week. And in the meantime, enjoy your knitting. Let me know how you're getting on with your MKAL, if you're joining in, or perhaps even just tell me what's your relationship to the mystery in your knitting, and how do you connect with that. Okay, I will speak to you next week.